everyone, and welcome to the North Pacific Broadcasting Service. Today I have Bobberino with me, and I will be interviewing him for his role in the North Pacific Army. How soon after joining the North Pacific did you get involved?
Well, pretty much immediately. I founded my nation on March 16th of 2018. So just about a brief 3 years ago. And I originally applied for the NPA, I want to say on the 18th. But that was denied due to me applying from school. I didn't log on to TNP's forums for another week or two. Thus, I didn't actually join the NPA Discord server until April 1st. And given the things that are associated with my time, both in the NPA and in TNP as a whole, that is when I consider my start date with the NPA. So, to answer your question, around 15 days.
Okay. Well, I actually missed half of the question there. I'm sorry. What were your early experiences like?
My early experiences mostly consisted of Malf's first and only term as Minister of Defense, and Zazimo's first term as Minister of Defense.
I see.
Both of them were terrific ministers of defense and trained me up pretty well. But up until around June of 2018, I want to say, was the time when the NPA realistically could do was either raid war zones or detag, because that's all we were legally permitted to do. There was a thing in place saying that we had to restore the region to its original state before we left, so we could do whatever we wanted, but we could never leave any sort of lasting impact on the region, even if it is on something as small as the World Factbook entry and flag, i.e., a tag raid. That changed under Zazimo, but that is out of the scope of this question.
I see. And now, did you have prior experience in R&Ding prior to becoming involved in the NPA?
None whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. That's a good answer. Is that the end of your answer, or?
That is the end of my answer.
Okay. Next question. Why should nations consider joining the North Pacific Army?
Well, first and foremost, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of banter back and forth between the individual people, and I'd like to say that quite a good few of the friends that I've made in nation states have come from the North Pacific Army, whether jumping with our allies or just amongst us. Um, like some of the people I've known for the longest in this game, such as Quiet Dad or Matthew, formerly known as NPA Officer Legend, Bluey, BMW Surfer, um, all had a role either in or Koopa, all had a role either being sort of mentored by me or mentoring me, and I consider a lot of them my personal friends.
I see. Now, what would new cadets experience when they first join the NPA?
It honestly, I can't really sugarcoat the fact that you're going to get a lot of questions up front from eager officers trying to teach you the ropes. Um, the you will it, R&D is not simple, no matter how you want to spin it. And there will be a lot of people trying to teach you the same thing. But once you have the very basics down, it's a it's just a downhill slide. You're just coming into home base, really. Because once you learn to, it's like learning to walk. Whereas once you learn to stand up, walking is a breeze in this case.
Okay. What was the most important lesson you learned as you got settled in the NPA?
Interesting question.
Thank you.
Probably learning how to switch quickly, given that it's the mechanic we most rely upon. And what switching refers to is you are going to need to have several puppets applied to the WA and set up in your email. And what switching means is switching between your different WA puppets. You may ask yourself, why do we need to use multiple puppets? The answer is that you cannot use one puppet for multiple regions, because once a puppet has updated in a region, it is useless for the rest of update. So, switching quickly allows for the army to get as many hits as possible in one update. That is what allows groups such as Lily to have the success that they do.
Okay. If you could offer one piece of advice to a new cadet, what would it be?
A new piece of advice. Give the NPA a good month worth of effort before you write it off as too difficult or too boring or too this or too that. Give it a good, genuine month's worth of effort. Try it out for what it is and see what the army has to offer before writing it off. If you choose to join, make the active decision to commit to it for a month, and the army will show you what it has to offer.
Good answer. Good answer. What did you find was the most enjoyable part of R&D?
Probably the aforementioned camaraderie. Updating and switching at the speed of light is fun and all that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done 300 operations in the North Pacific, and probably upwards of 150 updates mersing elsewhere. But I enjoy the banter. I enjoy hanging out with the nation states crowd for the most part, and I enjoy mentoring new nations. It's fun to me watching them rise from the new enlistee, seeing like, oh man, this new enlistee is they're gonna shock the world. They're looking good. They might be the next officer. They might be the next minister of defense. They might be the next general. Bang. I was once there one day. I sound old, but I'm not that old. At least I don't like to think I am.
I don't think you're that old. On the road to becoming a general, every NPA soldier must undergo their officer test. Can you recount your experience?
I was in the old generation of the officer test back before myself and Darkania decided that it was too faulty and linear, pass or fail one way or the other. But in the old system, you just needed to trigger one update. That's it. If you hit one region, even on a trigger as wide as 60 seconds, you passed your officer test. I decided to do 4 regions that I came up with myself. And I probably could pull up that thread if I could stall enough by talking pretty slowly in this
That's all
kind of
right.
manner.
Take your time. Take your time.
But I passed the officer test by hitting 2 out of those 4 regions. And here
2 out of 4 ain't bad.
I'll read the thread verbatim in just a moment. On April 29th, 2018, at the major update, meaning 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I Bobberino, took my officer test and detagged 2 regions with 6 NPAers in attendance, and the test was a success. The following soldiers participated: Bobberino, Quiet Dad, Dinoium, Duropia, Aber639, and Zezimo. The following regions have been detagged: United League of World Nations, Hearth of Hestia, and Bobberino is promoted to the rank of lieutenant for passing their officer test.
Impressive.
Which was a pretty standard officer test back in the day, where, again, you only have to hit one region. Everything else is fluff. Defenders wouldn't chase the NPA back in the day because they knew we weren't capable legally of doing any raiding. And it just was a different time. We just had different expectations, and thus we had a different officer test. But the officer test of then would not fill the officer test of now. So if you'll allow me, I'll go on a tangent of what the officer test is now.
Sure.
The officer test has sort of evolved into the new rank of warrant officer. We make it a subjective thing rather than a, hey, can you do this one clunky D tag and get promoted to lieutenant? It allows us to have subjective standards where the NPA, if the NPA has a standard of 30 hits an update, and the officer's only really capable of triggering to hit, say, 10 regions an update, then they might need some more time in the oven. But if they're up to the standard, then they coded. But what warrant officer does is it's not a failure per se at the beginning. You can keep them at warrant officer for 4 or 5 of their jumps perfectly fine. It allows for subjectivity in the grading, if you will.
Interesting. Pardon me. You became Minister of Defense for the first time in 2019. Why do you think you were chosen for the role?
Well, part of it was a little bit natural, because Darkania stepped down on March 26th, due to a bit of a spat with ABC, the former speaker here. about what was about the goings on in the speaker's office that term. ABC was not the speaker that term. However, I was chosen because I was Darkania's deputy minister. It doesn't go too much deeper than that, but if you were around the NPA at the time, you could have gotten the feeling that I was the next guy up. I had been in the oven. I was basically the handpicked successor by Darkania, and given the absolutely terrific job that Darkania was doing, it made sense to stick on that track per se.
Okay, next question. Can you discuss your leadership style in the office?
As somebody who likes leadership but doesn't like to really burn bridges, shall I say, I like to delegate responsibilities and work as a team with my high command group and and seek the advice of my generals and my officers to get mixed opinions and to work with them on a team to team basis. I applied that as best I could to my leadership, wherein the NPA was sort of a I don't really think there's a word for a it's not a tetrarchy strictly speaking, but it's the closest word I can think of at the moment. Um but it was like a first citizen type of leadership rather than an emperor type leadership, if you will.
Okay. Now, what do you see as the future of the NPA?
What do I see as the future of the NPA? Um the future of the NPA can go in a few different ways because it all depends on the Minister of Defense and how they're willing to work with both their command team and with um, foreign leaders, both allied, neutral, and somewhat anti-sympathetic, if that exists. Um, and frankly, I think the NPA, even despite some recent bumps in the road, is trending in a good direction. Because back in my day, as the boomers say, we were only doing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 D tags an update, and we would consider that good. We considered that normal. And now that's just not normal. That's not good anymore. We'll hit 10, 20, 15 in an update, which is still not that fast, but it's a matter of improvement both of the training quality and of the operational quality that we do. I think it's a gradual process and it's something that we've been working on over time, but I think it's something that we can continue to look forward to improve. And I think the region will be better off because of it.
Sorry, I accidentally turned the mic off. What has given you your greatest sense of pride when watching the NPA of today? Is there anyone in particular that you had a hand in training? Someone you took under your wing that's gone on to greater things?
Oh man, there's a laundry list of these people. I'd like to consider myself sort of a an influential figure in training both our current Minister of Defense, Nimaria, and as well as current Deputy Ministers of Defense, Koopa and Rom. Well, a note on Rom. He didn't really need any training. More so, I needed to drag him out of retirement and kind of brush the dust off of him. And now he's our Deputy Minister of Defense and one-time former Minister of Defense. Um, I'd also definitely held a role in bringing up Robespierre through the ranks as Minister of Defense. He became an officer almost immediately, kind of just showed up out of nowhere. As he had, just like Rom, been a former, he had joined TNP, but under a new alias. And yeah, Robespierre, Koopa, Nimaria, those are
That's
a
an
big three.
impressive list. What do you believe your legacy is to the NPA?
My legacy. Well, I would like to think first and foremost that my legacy is not fully written. I would like to hope that I have more to give. But if my story ended today, I would like to hope that I would like to be an example of how to advance in the NPA 101. Kind of work your tail off, make some friends, have some fun, hone your craft, get really good at updating, make some, as I said, make some friends, and most importantly, again, just have fun, because what the hell is the point of a game without having fun?
That is very true. That was the last question, so we're going to open up to questions from the audience.
Ask the boomer.
That's right. Ask me anything, Bobberino edition.
Yeah, it is.
Jesus.
Ivanko asks, "Should I drink bleach?" I recommend against it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm no expert, but strong pass on that one.
I am not a doctor, but generally that'll fuck up your insides.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Nimaria
Bottoms
asks.
up. Okay, thanks, Viv. Thank you.
Nimaria asks, "What's the most important thing you want me to do as Minister of Defense this term?" I think you should capitalize on the great momentum that you've given the NPA so far. I think you need to continue to build. I think 9003 did some great work in terms of working with orgs that we generally didn't before. And he set a great foundation for you to build on, and it's your job to say really yes or no to in moving in that direction. Like, we don't have to call the Grey Wardens our friends, but with that said, we can still continue to move in a direction where we don't have to give defenders the cold shoulder at every single update because of some spat that Raven had with them. Just to throw an example out there.
Can I just remind the audience, no funny business in the Agora text channel, please? Only serious questions.
Sure. Of course. I am the most decorous of all NPA generals. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Koopa asks.
Oh, I was gonna read one out
why
for you.
Do you...
You're right.
Okay.
Go. You're right. Go. You're right. Go. Eureka?
Koopa asks, "Why do you already sound like a boomer?" I don't. Now go to bed. It's past your bedtime. Kretox asks, "Do you plan to serve as Minister of Defense or another high-level government position in the near future?" Well, if I'm offered Minister of Defense, I would love to serve. I do plan to keep myself around in governmental politics as much as possible. Because frankly, I find this fun. Um,
That makes one of us.
yeah, I'd elaborate, but I really don't have that much more to say. If you want to read one out, you can.
Do you believe that the code of governance is due an update? If so, what changes would you like to see?
Interesting question.
That is a good question. I'll skip to Rocket Dog. Sorry, Rocket Dog.
Yeah, I skipped a few, but
Sorry,
we'll
Viv.
circle back. We'll circle
Yeah,
back.
if we skipped you, it's because we
Um,
don't care about you. Sorry, guys.
yes, we hate you all.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Sorry, gentlemen. Apologize for that.
Um, the code of governance. I don't think so, really. Um,
Thanks, Viv.
because
Oh,
I think the code of governance has served the NPA to put it in a position to succeed moving forward. Um, but there is a change to the legal code that I have advocated for in the appropriate thread, which is to allow the NPA to tag raid either without the restriction of WFE/flag restoration or ejecting natives should the situation call for it. Okay, I'm moving up to Vivanko's question. What is your opinion on the latest R4R? While I think it's a legally sound ruling, I think it puts the NPA in a really bad position. And I'm glad that Peeps and LD have moved in a good position immediately to put the NPA back to the status quo before the R4R was filed.
okay. Anyone got any more
Rocket
questions?
Dog says, "Bobberino, why didn't you jump on my officer test? If I wasn't jumping on your officer test, I was probably busy doing something else. Most of the time, I don't forsake updates for silly reasons."
Okay.
Kretox says, "Do you believe that
I was just
non-residents
about to
should
read
be
that.
able to serve in the NPA?" Another
That's a
interesting
very good
question.
question. Yeah, that's a great question.
Though I don't though I'm also pretty adamant no. Just because the I don't think the NPA is a or rather I don't think it's that difficult to get a nation into TNP to maintain residency. Um and for that reason, I I think residency, even if non-WA, is a low enough bar that the NPA should enforce that for admittance. Kretox asks, "Do you believe that the restriction in serving in multiple militaries should be loosened?" Damn, you're on a row. You're on a roll. You're just hitting me hard here.
He is on a roll. That's a bit loud. Hang on.
Frankly,
That's better.
I think it should be. I think either generals or NPA high command members are trusted well enough that the multiple military rule can be loosened, with the caveat that they should be all other memberships must be disclosed to high command. The only real enforcement of that would be ejection from the NPA, or perhaps a criminal proceeding, such as perjury, if that falls under that blanket. Kretox asks, do you believe that the high command / general system functions well in its current state? I think so, yes. It's meant to give people access to the NPA command channel. Yeah, leaks. We have a command channel. Who would have thunk it? We have the it also allows for deputy ministers of defense to come into the room and learn from both generals and the minister of defense to be future ministers of defense. In the past, we've either had one deputy minister or one junior and one senior deputy minister, or a chief of staff and a junior deputy minister. It's all really just nomenclature for who gets access into the room. And frankly, I don't know why we would need a redesign, as it serves its purpose. I see Kratox typing. Should the Minister of Defense / General should the Minister of Defense get high command / general status indefinitely, or just for the duration of their term? I think it's a pretty straightforward question. I think the Minister of Defense should just get it for the duration of their term. As much as the Minister of Defense contributes to the NPA by virtue of being the leader of the NPA and sort of doing the whole shebang, leading the high command, telling the generals what to do, and learning from everybody in the room. Like, even the leader learns, even the generals learn. You don't stop learning till the day you die, and I'm adamant about that. I think the Minister of Defense, just by being Minister of Defense, it shouldn't automatically grant you access to high command, as we have both the NPA Hall of Honor and the general system that are meant to be that kind of thing. And the Minister of Defense is considered to be a general for the duration of their term, so they cannot promote themselves. Westonor asks, when will you trigger again? Well, you see, little rascal, I didn't trigger that long ago. It was Operation 535. What operation are we on? 542. So yeah, I'm pretty good at this. I triggered pretty recently. Nerd. Coming from you. Yeah, I triggered for that CCD thing. Kretox asks, do you believe that the Hall of Honor is visible enough to the wider public? Honestly, I don't really think so, given that it's still kind of in flux and it just got put into place. But will you, in order to really decide what to do about it, or if we really do need to do anything about it, um, time needs to pass, members need to join, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it kind of just needs to take on its own identity more for us to know what to do about it, if anything. Burr versus Lunar Punk, your thoughts. Lunar Punk, it's pretty obvious. Because a jump point is a jump point is a jump point, no matter really how you look at it. I don't, as cool as Burb is, it looks, whatever, I don't really weigh that at all. I think a jump point is just as cool as any other jump point. What's funny is a little bit of backstory. My first Minister of Defense term all coincided with April Fool's Day of 2019, which was the most recent update shuffle that we had. The Drew Journal thing was just the extension or retraction of the length of update, not the order of update. But I was going to move us from our old jump point, HC Metallurg, into Haywa, which was going to be our new shiny jump point, because it had been our secondary jump point for years, our Lunar Punk, whereas Burb was HC Metallurg. Except the difference was not 1 minute, rather HC Metallurg cost us 10 minutes of update, nearly. Haywa was one of the last regions to update, and we just refused to use it because of tradition. So at the beginning of my term, I was really annoyed that I couldn't trigger for those last 10 minutes of update. So once I became Minister of Defense, I planned an op for April 1st to both commemorate my to commemorate 1 year of my service to the NPA, and to commemorate me becoming the Minister of Defense, and to officially move. It was going to be like 75 puppets, I want to say, from HC Metallurg to Haywa for that jump. And the first 10 minutes of update were really weird because everything was updating out of order. Some things were just not updating at all. Some things updated well before. And then I realized Haywa updated 20 minutes into update. And I realized NS had just pulled a prank on me, because they freaking update shuffled right as I was going to trigger a 75 hitter in 60 minutes. Just absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, with that anecdote aside, that's my rationale for Haywa versus HC Metallurg, and it completely translates to Lunar Punk versus Burb. Burb was actually given to us by after that jump, so that we'd have a jump point. Kretox asks, under what circumstances should the first part of the following provision be utilized, and does it make sense to keep it? Except with the special permission of the Minister of Defense, all personnel begin their service in the NPA at the rank of private. Why am I the only one asking questions? Yeah, seriously, guys, come on. Ask me dumb shit like what my favorite flavor of ice cream is.
We need more questions, yes.
Weston Orr asked what my favorite flavor of ice cream is.
Where did he get
It
the
is chocolate chip
inspiration for
cookie
that
dough.
one?
East Isles asks, do you prefer vanilla or strawberry ice cream? Vanilla.
Vanilla, yeah,
But to chocolate chip cookie dough, Weston Orr. So to return to Kretox's question, we all have I don't know why I'm getting in my own way. This is a really easy statement to make. Anyway, when somebody who's, say, a captain comes back to the NPA, they are immediately restored to that rank of captain.
Okay.
That is one of the circumstances in which that provision is used. However, what you're probably thinking of is probably something different. And with regards to that something different, it's exceedingly rare. But we can and sometimes have discussions about using it for people like, say, I don't know, just as a hypothetical, Fratistan were to apply to and join the NPA. He's tired of running the RRA and wants to join the NPA because he wants to see some independentism. There would certainly be discussion among high command people about where to place him. I'm sure he would not object to being started off as a private, but regardless of that, there would be discussion among high command people about whether to start him at lieutenant, the lowest officer rank, or somewhere else. Like, we could start him at captain, we could start him at, say, warrant officer, the testing rank, or even like sergeant. There are a million different ways you could go about that particular applicant. Is that sufficient, Kretox?
Yeah. Kretox, yes.
Awesome.
Good answer.
Weston Orr asks, who's your favorite officer? Does that count deputy ministers of defense or other quote-unquote special officers holding a temporary office for this term, or just plain red officers? Red referring to the mask they have on the server being red. Okay, including deputy ministers of defense.
And not including. Including and not including.
Probably Rom, Koopa, Nightblood, Telons, Praetor, 9003, Garundu, Robespierre,
You can only choose
and
one.
BMW Surfer.
You can only choose one.
Probably because Koopa was the first person that I mentored coming in as coming up through the ranks. Probably Koopa. If I just had to pick one.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And no, that's not just because you're in the chat, Koopa. Who would I say was my mentor? I don't have one mentor. Um, I had a massive, absolutely massive group of mentors that I pretty much listed out on my appointment thread as Minister of Defense, because I could not adequately do them justice otherwise. I had to just shout them all out. And probably there's probably dozens out there, but I would say my primary mentors were Lozanak, Zazimo, Malf, Quiet Dad, Darkania, Bluey Gamer, BMW Surfer, McMaster, and Ghost. I don't know. That's probably a decent list right there, but there's 10 others.
There's another very important question in there. So,
Who is your favorite chimpanzee? Probably you, because you're able
oh wow,
to speak English.
wow, thank you. So, do I have to pay you now or what?
If I wasn't in the NPA, which other org would I like to join? Probably Lily, because I could get Koru and Buzzy Bee. And with Koru and Buzzy Bee, oh man, oh yes, I probably would be one of the top 5 fastest people on site. But no, in all honesty, I would join Tito because I am a staunch moralist defender, and I say that with no shred of sarcasm whatsoever. Did you draw on knowledge from other orgs in your NPA development? Um, I would say so. Yeah. Um, back then, we given that all we could do were D tags, we didn't work with the Blackhawks as much. That and the fact that we also didn't that was also around when the red phone incident came out, which basically shut off all communications between TNP and the Blackhawks for the entirety of Sawale's the back half of Sawale's second term and Ghost's third term in office. Um, the latter of which coincided with my first term as Minister of Defense. And as you all know, LVG Grande, who was the delegate next, is a defender. And defenders don't quite like the Blackhawks. I don't know why. The Blackhawks are such a great defending organization. But the yeah, that I draw on orgs such as I drew on orgs in my development such as the SPSF, the Blackhawks a little bit, um, the RRA and the ERN and EPSA, especially when was in its leadership, because early on I interacted a lot with as I kind of found her to be an inspiring story. Do you believe that NPA benefits from its independent standing? And are we in bed with Raiders? I absolutely believe that the NPA benefits from its independent standing, and I think the NPA needs to continue with its staunch independence, its standing. And even despite my despite my own personal Raider leaning independent leanings, if I phrase that correctly, um, I think that I think that the SPS, I think that the NPA, um, I think the NPA needs to continue to slowly be loosened by the RA in terms of what it can do. Because for a while, it's been kind of stuck in quicksand, as I've kind of alluded to a few times. We've been behind the bell curve, if you wish, or if you will, rather. The RA needs to obviously be able to tell the NPA what to do, as we are subordinate to the delegate, which is also subordinate to the regional assembly ultimately. However, we also need to be able to function as an org in a modern gameplay far different than the gameplay of 2018 that the NPA legislation is currently written for. That's why I believe that the NPA should be allowed to freely tag raid with the same amount of freedom as the Blackhawks, and freely defend with the same amount of freedom as the Grey Wardens, and freely occupy with the same amount of oversight as Elwu, that is none, with the caveat that the regional assembly keeps its eye on the happenings of the North Pacific Army in the way that it does in the deployments thread. Do you believe that the NPA needs to be modernized in any way? Yes, I do. I think we need all the scripts. Quite frankly, I think a script such as Buzzy Bee would be absolutely massive for the NPA, as the NPA has the numbers to kind of end gameplay if we had the same scripting power that a group like Lily does. Basically, gameplay would be decided on the whims of TNP. And given that we have independent standing, that would allow us the ultimate in political flexibility with who we decide to flex our muscles with that day. Buzzy Bee is the trigger bot. You would also want Koru and Vogel for switching and stuff. Do you believe in life after love? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Chimp. Are you all right? Did somebody take your bananas?
Okay, that's not called for.
Do believe in miracles, says East Isles. I do believe in miracles. I've seen them happen in front of my eyes. Thoughts on quorum rating? I think it's fine. I honestly think it's fine. I generally think the NPA should utilize quorum rating as a tool to sort of not entirely kibosh things we don't like, but especially use it as a political tool to win over regions that may not politically be the worst, or that may not be politically I think it can be used as a tool in foreign affairs, is what I'll say, because I really don't know how to word it much better than that. But ultimately, the NPA itself is a tool in foreign affairs. So it all kind of intertwines in foreign affairs. So yes, quorum rating, good. NPA, use it, etc. What do you think? What do you think is the NPA's greatest strength from Weston Orr? I think the NPA's greatest strength is our recruiting and our training when we have somebody in the net. Like, for example, you make a great example. You joined the NPA like what, a month ago? You're now a sergeant. You have, let me pull it up. By the way, this information is all public, so I'm not leaking anything here. Oh, 3 months? It's a lot longer than I thought. But regardless, Westenor joined the NPA recently, and has 21 ops under her belt, and has performed admirably in all of them, like to the point of being first in on several different joint operations that have huge numbers of jumpers. And those kinds of things are the things that high command and the officers look for when looking for the next warrant officer, the next deputy minister of defense, the next minister of defense, etc. And again, this information is all public. It's all a matter of compiling it, which is done neatly for you on the North Pacific Army roster. The North Pacific Army roster can be accessed under the Defense Forum of the Delegates Government thread in the North Pacific's forums. Does the NPA have sufficient manpower, sufficient training? The NPA has more than sufficient manpower, but I do think the NPA could always use more manpower, because 11 turns into 12, turns into 15. And those are the kinds of numbers we would get back in my day. I'm old, I swear. And those kinds of numbers are what get you shouted out on the gameplay forums as some of the best orgs out there. And I already think we're up there, but I think there's always better places to go. There's never a number where we can be like, oh, we're good, we don't need more. You can always get better. Sufficient training. I think the NPA is pretty good where training is involved. Because you can only really train a person if the person is willing to be trained. I'll again shout out Westenor as well as East Isles, who's in this VC, who both are doing well so far. East Isles, I believe, is far more recent than Westenor. I don't remember the date East Isles joined. Kretox can inform me again because he's a freaking stalker. East Isles says around 2 weeks. He has 5 ops under his belt and has recently started pointing. And as a private first class, that's not really something the NPA does at that early. But if you start doing it, then why not? I mean, you've shown he's shown the ability to jump well. He's shown the ability to keep up in passer operations. And again, those are the things you look for in your next warrant officers, your next deputy ministers of defense, your next ministers of defense, your next generals. The training we have is about a mutual partnership in the trainee and the trainer. Time to scroll up. And any thoughts on how to improve potential shortcomings in the above? I think I addressed that sufficiently. Weston Orr, do you prefer sugary or savory foods? I am absolutely a sugar person. It's a vice. Like, my sweet tooth is absolutely unending. Though I am always down for a good, uh, I could just sink my teeth into a steak and just never come back.
Hmm.
Questions, give me questions so I can talk. I love these things. Kretox asks, what's your stance on joint ops, and is the NPA doing enough or too many or too few of them? Honestly, I think the NPA is doing a good number of them. The last term was plagued by primarily, I think, too many joint ops. And it showed the danger of too many joint ops and what that can do to the NPA in terms of a lack of culture, lack of officers leading things, and lack of an organic org, if you will. Like, it sounds harsh, but if you were paying attention last term, and I know many of you were, it was pretty clear as day. Now, this term with the new leadership, I think we've had the right stance. One a week, two, if there's an exception, um, is a decent number. And we kind of have found a good homeostasis with regards to this again. Um, and we've developed our own sort of genuine culture within the NPA of triggering, of leading, of jumping on our own. And we'll be back to working on our own with groups coming to us to join us for a run. Kretox asks, daily piles, A or nay? Nay. I think they're a pretty bad idea unless you have kind of ridiculous numbers. Like if you're pulling 15 updaters like I was in my term, or 20 updaters plus pilers within 24 hours, like I was, you're never going to beat defenders in today's atmosphere with a revived Tito and an active Gray Wardens. Uh, Plus, they're just kind of just not a good idea, I don't think. Kretox, what org is the easiest / best to work with? I think Frenchie has done some really great work with Lily. And Lily has just moved to sort of an informal place where Lily is just kind of open and just doing everything they want, but they're also getting a lot of great work done in terms of anti-fascist stuff like hitting CCD on a regular basis, and also in terms of moving against, in terms of doing things like the nation states hit and other big joint ops like that. Lily's just doing those, kind of just rattling them off, it seems. Frenchie has got Lily moving very well in that direction. Another great org to work with would be ERN, the Europea. I think they're a longtime ally of ours, and we've been working together for as long as the orgs have existed, and that has allowed us both to kind of grow into each other's spheres as independent orgs, growing into the modern sphere of R&D, and we kind of both define what is this new sort of independentism. I think it's cool. Westenor asks, when will you lead us on a 100 puppet tag run? Soon, motherfucker. Soon. Kretox asks, what can we learn from Tito? What can we learn from Tito? Recruitment tactics, internal promotion, and on a less NPA or defense focused thing, reform factions. New players like Grey Creopia and Wish Me Luck have kind of not like taken over completely, but like definitely exerted their influence over the organization, and they've kind of they've reformed it from sort of a moralist defender backwater that nobody with even a drop of independent blood in them would touch, into a halfway respectable org. They're not yet there in terms of where I would consider the Grey Wardens kind of fun to defend with, as in they're really chill about it. They're not moralist. They're just defenders because they're defenders. They treat it like a game because it's a game. The Grey Wardens are good at that. And Tito just isn't there yet. But I think they're on their way. Out of the existing military orgs, where would you rank the NPA from Westenor? In terms of a tier list? Westenor? Sure. The NPA is in A tier. The NPA is not quite at the S tier, where they could just take over R&D at a split second notice, or just start running around one particular faction in circles like Lily is with the independent faction, or just shut down a faction like the Grey Wardens once could. Probably the only S tier org at the moment would be Lily. Maybe not the Grey Wardens. No, I'm pretty sure I would grade the only S tier faction as being Lily, or not faction, but org, because they just are pulling more and more updaters to hit a ridiculous number of regions. Like the other day, I ran with them as a Merce and got 161 hits. And that kind of speed is what puts you in S tier in my book. But that's all a subjective thing. Thoughts on attrition runs from Kretox. Attrition runs are an interesting topic. And but I think the NPA can make good use of them if we have a set destination and a set mindset. We know how to do them. We've done them in the past. Like when you say the word attrition, my mind goes to not Anantia, but it was the Warzone Federation op I did at the end of my term that some people compared to Femdom, and Femdom itself was attrition, just in its purest form. And yeah, those are my thoughts on attrition. East Isles. Should the NPA become a moralist defender org? The NPA should follow the wishes of the regional assembly. Should the regional assembly choose to move in a moralist defender direction, then the NPA should follow. But I don't foresee the regional assembly doing something stupid like that. Kretox, is the NPA making effective use of sleepers? With keeping regards of OPSEC, we are keeping everything in the house up top, locked away in the command channel in terms of specifics, but we have things brewing, and we have feelers out there, if you will. Kretox, Lily is an interregional organization. Do you think pursuing a similar course for the NPA or other militaries in general could be fruitful? Lily was never really an interregional organization. They just said that on paper. And nowadays, that is the only thing mentioned on the only thing that is interregional about them is the fact that interregional is mentioned on their WFB. I don't really know that. I don't really think that it has a fine track record of success in the long run, but I don't think it has a fine record of success with other orgs, but I think it has potential if done right. Questions. I noticed you joined, Fiji.
Questions.
Have I seriously exhausted your questions, Kretox? I'm proud of myself.
That is impressive. How does one view Agora attacks and not be in the Agora? Exactly, yeah, that's a good answer.
Should the NPA make an effort to train common TNPers as a form of reserve force / militia? I absolutely think that's a form of untapped power that TNP has. TEP made it an effort to do that for Operation Boom Beach, and though they missed the jump on the first region, we managed to make it into Alnovia and hold that with our reserve force, the TEP militia, and form the largest jump force in the history of nation states, which was the entire point of that operation. Do we have any other questions? By the way, I'll be sticking around in the Agora, actual Agora, after this if anybody wants to chat. When is the coup taking place? Soon, trademark. Neutrality / refusing to develop a regional military. Foolish or fine? From Kretox. I think it's foolish, depending on your region. But I because in some UCRs it's actually genuinely useful for regional defense. But in even in major UCRs like say the communist bloc or Europea or Europe, um, there are there are there are benefits to having a regional military, such as the access to FA priorities that allow that a regional military give you that you cannot really have access to without a regional military. Um, and that's why I suggest to all prospective region builders that a defense force, even if local, is a good thing. How does recruiting for a military differ from broader regional recruitment? Well, it requires committing a WA at least some of the time, and it requires a lot more time investment because you have to actually update. Updating takes quite a bit of time, as a minor update lasts for approximately 60 minutes and major for 75 to 90. And it's kind of it's an interesting dynamic that you point at there, but it's a big distinction. Do you believe that NPA specific games / events are useful for keeping people engaged between ops? I would say so, because I ran some informal game nights when I was Minister of Defense. if I was Minister of Defense now, I probably would play some games of Among Us. I own the Jackbox series. I'd play some Jackbox with them, etc., etc., etc. Um, and as I've pointed out, like I consider NPA members a lot of them to be my friends. So informal game nights like that work for just hanging out as well as just to, as well as to recruit and keep engaged. I'll let Peter ask his question. Peter asks, not sure if you answered this already, but do you consider the new alliance with XKI a significant threat to the NPA's activities? I presume you're talking about the partnership for sovereignty between TRR, TSP, and XKI? I don't think so. It's mostly a WA block more than it is an R&D organization. And even if it was an R&D organization, it would basically just be a formal um it would be a formal form, if that works, of what basically already exists in what's known as libcord and has been kind of mentioned and thrown around in TNP circles for a long time. I'm not sure if there's really a broader understanding in TNP circles of what libcord is, but I'll briefly cover what it is here. It's basically just the liberation server on Discord, thus libcord, where all liberations and defender operations are to take place, except for XKI, who for reasons unknown to me, run things out of their own server. They use artificial solar system, which is libcord's / the Grey Warden's jump point, but they don't. For whatever reason, they jump from their own server and then cross up on the Grey Wardens / Defender updaters rather than staging in actual libcord. It just makes defending easier because it's a bunch of orgs committed to defending in one server and in one op channel at a time rather than in all their own separate servers. Kretox asks, should there be greater incentives for NPA membership and service? Is the current epic a month that NPAers get sufficient in the face of the WADP for non-NPAers? I honestly don't know where I fall on it, because at some point I think a lot of it falls to NPA loyalty, but I think depending how it works out with I think depending on how the prices work out with Ren, that we might be able to squeeze out a legendary a month or an epic every 2 weeks, depending on how all that shakes out. That might be better. But eventually it could be best to just keep things the way they are once we up it, because eventually you're just going to love the NPA, I would hope. Peter, does the NPA already have a system like the ministries, with awards based on your amount of activity rather than membership? Yes, every 10 ops, I believe you're given a legendary. And there's also a certain amount for every amount that you trigger. Yes, rank 2. You're given you might get like a legendary or something if you rank up. I forget what it is. East Isles could tell you because he just got promoted. I'll take last questions and then I'll answer Fiji's question about concluding the interview.
Oh,
Yeah, that works.
oh.
Going once, going twice. Sold. Any last thoughts to conclude the interview? Well, given that I've spent an hour and a half talking about the NPA and singing its praises, join the NPA first and foremost. But realistically, I think joining the NPA has a lot of different. It just has a lot of things that can go right for you. I don't really think you're going to lose anything other than your endorsements if you join. Um, it's not a there are a lot of opportunities, both creative and update wise, for you to apply your talents no matter what you're really good at. Like, Rom's not the fastest in the world, but he keeps up, he does his stuff, and we dusted him off, and now he's a functioning member of high command for certain definition of functioning. And if you can wake him up on a Saturday afternoon before 11 o'clock. The Another thing is that the NPA, as I mentioned, is a great opportunity to find friendship and to have a lot of the same benefits that you get from just hanging out in such a big region like TNP. You're going to find a lot of people that have the same common interests as you. You're going to have a lot of people who are willing to help you out with just stuff you've got to get done. Like, I personally met BMW through the NPA, and BMW helped at least get me through my calculus class. Because I am not particularly that good at math. That's why I'm not in engineering. But with that tangent aside, the NPA is also really good just to serve the region. So yeah, with all that rambling aside, as Fiji mentioned, grumble, grumble, grumble. I'm gonna end it here. Thank you guys for listening. Join the NPA.
Thank you very much.